Sometimes God puts something on your heart that's totally impossible, and then He does it. And your job is to walk with Him in faith through all the hurdles. It started with a Main Street ride on Saturday night from one of the athletes. His name was Roy. And Roy said, "You guys ought to go to church. It'd do you a lot of good." And they said, "Yeah, we notice it's doing you a lot of good, Roy. Ha, ha, ha." And it was really raucous. Well, it broke his heart. The next morning on Sunday, I was speaking in the church where he was. He came up to me afterwards and he said, "I want to talk to you. I was on Main Street last night and they thought that was the funniest thing they ever heard. And I want them to become Christians, and my witness has been weak, been terrible. Can you help me?" I said, "I'd be happy to, Roy." So we began to pray. I said, "Well, the first thing, we need to get a 10 most wanted list. We need to get some of those men that were in that car that we're going to pray for. Is that right, Roy? Well, do you think of that be a good idea?" He said, "Oh, yeah." So we drew up a list of 10 most wanted. And, of course, he picked the fullback as number 1. Then he picked the half-miler as number 2. Then he picked a gentleman named Cott, who's one of the features in this story, Cottrell, and as number 3. And I said, "Now, why is he number 3? Well, he said, "I think we have to give a little time to work on him." I said, "Well, okay." And I said, "Now, when do we want these men to start receiving Christ?" He said, "Well, I want the fullback to receive Christ by September 29th. So I said, "Well, fine." And when on the 29th, it was Sunday afternoon, the fullback received Christ, why, Roy was sure that God was going to do it for the rest of the men. And we said, get the fullback and yourself there, and I'll be there, and we'll pray in my apartment. So we began to pray for 3 hours. And then the half-miler received Christ that week. I'd said, "We're going to start a meeting on Friday nights. We're going to bring a man. I'm going to bring a man. You're going to bring a man. We're going to pray that everyone receives Christ." So everyone did begin to receive Christ on Friday nights. Well, we were very happy to think that our friend Cott would be coming to Christ very soon. Well, now this really is surprising, because Cott had just stolen the faculty television set for a .22 pistol. And of course, he was the campus alcohol consumer of great rapport. So Roy had said to him, "Cott, I want you to come to church with me Sunday, and I want you to really become a Christian." And Cott laughed at him and said, "Well, if you follow me through the bars Saturday night after the basketball game in Dallas, and bring me home, sober me up, put me in a shower, I'll go to church with you. But remember, you got to do that." So Roy followed him through several bars and a couple of bar fights, and drove him all the way back to Rice, put him in his, brought him to his room, put him in the other bed, and sobered him up the next morning in a cold shower, and brought him to church. And Cott came out next to the fullback after the service, and Roy said, "What did you do, Cott? Did you receive Christ?" And Cott looked at him and then looked at the fullback and said, "I don't know what you mean by that, but I asked Jesus to wash away all my sin with His precious blood." And he poured out his heart to God. Rarely have I heard such prayer with tears. And Roy said, "You have just become a Christian." Well, the next morning was Monday. And lo and behold, at 8 o'clock in the morning, a troop of rabid, raucous people came up to Cott's door and beat on it and said, "Cott, come out. We heard you became a Christian last night. Is that true?" And Cott came out in his PJs and said, "Yeah, I became a Christian last night." "What?" This raucous bunch of athletes were calling all around the quad, "Cott became a Christian." And doors opened, and everybody said, "What happened?" And they started to say, "Cott became a Christian." And Cott looked across and then said, "You haven't got a chance. We're praying for you." Out loud, you know, and all the other athletes were, "What?" "Yeah, we pray for you every Sunday. You're all going to become Christians. You haven't got a chance. and they ate in the common room with all the other students, but they were down at the end. And they all stood up and said, "Why don't you say grace for us, Roy?" So in summary, we have men that have really distinguished themselves. Cott became a high school principal in a Christian school. Roy became a missionary to Thailand, and I have his prayer letter here. I get his prayer letter each month. And there are other men that have gone into ministry. So ministers and the rest have come out of this movement. It's been a great experience.